The slap echoed through the hallway like a gunshot, and every student in Roosevelt High School froze. But that moment was still 20 minutes away. Right now, Brooke Sullivan sat in the passenger seat of her millionaire husband's Mercedes, watching the familiar brick buildings of Roosevelt High come into view. At 29 and 7 months pregnant, she glowed with that ethereal beauty that came with carrying new life, though exhaustion shadowed her green eyes. "Remember what we discussed," Grant Whitmore said, his voice carrying that particular tone she'd learned to recognize over their 3 years of marriage. Not quite threatening, but definitely commanding. "This scholarship thing needs to make financial sense. I'm not running a charity." Brooke placed a protective hand over her rounded belly. "Tyler is a good kid. Grant, he has a 4.0 grade point average and works 2 jobs to help his family. Your foundation could change his life." "My foundation," Grant emphasized, pulling into the principal's parking space without asking permission, "exists for strategic investments in future leaders, not handouts to sob stories." The October sun streamed through the windshield, warming Brooke's face as she watched students heading to after-school activities. She remembered when teaching here had been her passion, before Grant convinced her that his wife shouldn't work, before he explained that her salary was embarrassing compared to his millions in real estate holdings. "Brooke, straighten up," Grant commanded as they walked toward the main entrance. "And fix your cardigan. You look sloppy." She automatically adjusted her posture, a response trained through months of similar corrections. The navy cardigan was new, expensive, chosen by Grant himself. Everything she wore was expensive now, selected to reflect his success rather than her comfort. Dorothy Sullivan looked up from her desk as they entered the principal's office. At 58, Brooke's mother commanded respect without effort. 25 years as an educator had given her an authoritative presence that even millionaire husbands found intimidating. Her steel gray hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. "Brooke, sweetheart," Dorothy said, rising to embrace her pregnant daughter. "You look beautiful. How are you feeling?" "Good, Mom. The baby's been active today." Brooke's voice carried genuine warmth for the first time since leaving the car. Grant stepped forward, extending his hand. "Judge Sullivan, thank you for making time for us." Dorothy shook his hand politely but coolly. She'd retired from the bench 2 years ago to become principal of Roosevelt High, but Grant still used her former title, as if reminding everyone of his connection to judicial power. "It's Principal Sullivan here. Grant, please sit down." Maureen Banks, the school secretary and Brooks' former colleague, knocked on the door. "Principal Sullivan, Tyler Brooks is here for the meeting." "Send him in, please." Tyler entered nervously, clutching a manila folder. At 16, he was tall for his age but thin, wearing clean but worn clothes that spoke of careful maintenance rather than regular replacement. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his brown eyes held the intelligence that made him stand out academically. "Good afternoon, Principal Sullivan, Mrs. Whitmore." Tyler's voice cracked slightly with nerves. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for considering my application." Grant remained seated while Tyler stood, a power play Brooke recognized. "Sit down, Tyler. Let's review your materials." Dorothy gestured to the chairs arranged in a circle, trying to create a more welcoming atmosphere. "Tyler, why don't you tell Mr. Whitmore about your academic goals?" Tyler opened his folder with hands that trembled slightly. "I want to study engineering at State University. I've already been accepted, but the tuition—" He swallowed hard. "My mom works 2 jobs since my dad left, and my little sister needs new school clothes. The scholarship would cover everything: tuition, books, housing." Grant leaned back in his chair, studying Tyler like a specimen. "Tell me about your family's financial situation. Specifically—" "Grant," Brooke said quietly, "maybe we could focus on Tyler's academic achievements first. I'll determine what's relevant." "Brooke," Grant's voice carried a warning edge. "Continue, Tyler." Tyler glanced at Brooke uncertainly. "My mom makes about $20,000 a year between her jobs at the diner and cleaning office buildings at night. We live in the Riverside apartments, and sometimes we have to choose between groceries and utilities. And your father, he left when I was 12. We don't receive any support." Grant made a note on his phone. So you're looking for a handout because your father abandoned his responsibilities. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Dorothy's eyes narrowed, and Brooke felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. It's not a handout, Tyler said, his voice stronger now. I maintain a 4.0 average while working 25 hours a week. I tutor younger students for free and volunteer at the community center. I'm not looking for charity. I'm looking for an investment in my future. An investment requires a return, Grant said coldly. What guarantee do I have that you won't end up like your father's statistics show that children from broken homes are more likely to fail? Brooke felt the baby kick, as if responding to her rising stress. Grant, that's not fair. Life isn't fair. Brooke, business decisions require objective analysis, not emotional responses. Dorothy intervened, her principal voice firm but controlled. Tyler has demonstrated exceptional character and commitment. His teachers consistently praise his work ethic and leadership abilities. Teachers, Grant said dismissively, are notoriously poor judges of real-world potential. They live in academic bubbles, detached from economic realities. The insult to her mother and former profession made Brooke's hands clench. Grant, these are good people trying to help a deserving student. Good people enable dependency, Grant replied, his voice rising slightly. Tyler, if you can't afford college, maybe you should consider trade school or military service. Not every person is college material. I have a 4.0 average, Tyler repeated, his voice tight with controlled anger. Grades from a mediocre public school don't necessarily translate to college success. Have you considered that maybe you're reaching beyond your natural capabilities? The cruelty of the statement hung in the air. Dorothy's face flushed with anger, but her judicial training kept her voice level. Mr. Whitmore, Tyler's PSAT scores place him in the 95th percentile nationally. His capabilities are well documented. Grant waved dismissively. Test scores can be artificially inflated through coaching and grade manipulation. I've seen it before. That's enough, Brooke said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. Tyler works harder than most kids from privileged backgrounds. He deserves this opportunity. Grant's attention snapped to his wife like a laser. Excuse me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brooke felt her mother's concerned gaze and Tyler's confused expression, but Grant's stare dominated everything. I said Tyler deserves the scholarship. He's exactly the kind of student your foundation should support. My foundation, Grant said slowly, will make decisions based on sound business principles, not pregnancy hormones affecting your judgment. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Through the office windows, students could be seen gathering in the hallway, drawn by voices that had grown louder than anyone realized. Perhaps we should take a break, Dorothy suggested diplomatically. No, Grant said, standing up. I think it's time for some clarity about how real-world decisions get made. Brooke remained seated, one hand protectively over her belly, watching her husband transform before her eyes. The charming millionaire who'd swept her off her feet was disappearing, replaced by something cold and calculating. Tyler clutched his folder, clearly wanting to escape but afraid to move. Maureen appeared in the doorway, concern evident on her face as she noticed the growing crowd of students in the hallway. Principal Sullivan, Maureen said quietly, should I ask the students to move along? But Dorothy was watching Grant, her judicial instincts recognizing dangerous escalation when she saw it. 25 years on the bench had taught her to read the signs of someone about to lose control. Yes, Maureen, clear the hallway, please. But it was too late for quiet resolution. Grant was past the point of caring about appearances or witnesses. His mask was slipping, and everyone in the room could see what lay beneath. The crowd in the hallway continued to grow despite Maureen's efforts to disperse the students. Word traveled fast in high schools, and the sight of the principal in a heated meeting with the pregnant former teacher and her millionaire husband was too compelling to ignore. Grant moved to the window, observing the gathering students with obvious irritation. This is exactly the kind of undisciplined environment that produces mediocre results. No wonder the graduation rates are so poor. Roosevelt High has an 87% graduation rate, Dorothy said evenly, which exceeds the state average. Barely adequate, Grant dismissed. In the business world, we measure success by excellence, not by scraping past minimum standards. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly regretting having asked for this meeting. His scholarship application suddenly felt presumptuous in the face of Grant's hostility. "Mr. Whitmore," Tyler said quietly, "if this isn't a good time, I can come back later." "No, Tyler, stay," Brooks said firmly. "Your application deserves full consideration, regardless of anyone's personal opinions." Grant whirled around, his face darkening. "Personal opinions, I'm applying objective business criteria to evaluate an investment opportunity. The fact that you can't separate emotion from logic is exactly why wives shouldn't be involved in financial decisions." The statement hit like a slap. Dorothy's eyes widened, and Tyler looked shocked at the casual dismissal of Brooks' intelligence and judgment. "I taught high school for 6 years," Brooks said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I think I understand student potential better than someone who's never worked in education. You taught for 6 years before I married you and provided you with a lifestyle that made working unnecessary," Grant corrected coldly. "Your teaching career was a temporary phase before you found your proper role as my wife." "My proper role?" Brooks' voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Teaching was my career, not a hobby I was playing at until marriage." Grant stepped closer to her chair, using his height to loom over her. "Your career was making $35,000 a year and sharing a cramped apartment with a roommate. I elevated you to social prominence and financial security. The least you can do is show appropriate gratitude." Dorothy felt her maternal instincts flaring. "Grant, I think you need to reconsider your tone." "My tone is perfectly appropriate for addressing unrealistic expectations," Grant snapped. "Tyler here wants something for nothing. Brooke wants to give away my money based on misguided sympathy. Neither of you seems to understand how wealth is actually created and maintained." "Wealth is maintained by investing in potential," Dorothy said firmly. "Tyler represents exactly the kind of investment that builds stronger communities." "Communities are built by strong families with traditional values," Grant shot back. "Single mothers raising children in poverty create cycles of dependency that drain resources from productive members of society." Tyler's face flushed red. "My mother works 60 hours a week to support us. She's not dependent on anyone." "Your mother made poor choices that put her in that position," Grant said with brutal directness. "Choosing a man who abandoned his responsibilities, having children she couldn't afford, remaining in a minimum wage job instead of developing marketable skills. Those are personal failures, not societal obligations." "That's enough," Brooks said, struggling to rise from her chair. At 7 months pregnant, quick movements were difficult, but anger gave her determination. "Tyler's family situation isn't his fault, and it doesn't diminish his achievements." Grant's attention focused entirely on his wife, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Sit down, Brooke. You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself. You're the one attacking a 16-year-old honor student because his family doesn't meet your arbitrary standards of worthiness." The room fell silent except for the sound of voices in the hallway. Through the window, more students and even some parents had gathered, drawn by the obvious tension visible through the glass. "The arbitrary standard," Grant said slowly, "is return on investment. I didn't become successful by throwing money at every sob story that crosses my desk. I built my fortune through careful analysis and strategic thinking, concepts that apparently exceed your understanding." Dorothy stood up, her full authority as both principal and former judge coming to bear. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to have to ask you to moderate your language and tone. This is a school environment, and your behavior is becoming disruptive." Grant laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Disruptive? I'm trying to conduct a business evaluation while being lectured by women who have no understanding of wealth creation or economic reality." "Women." Dorothy's voice carried 25 years of judicial authority. "Did you just dismiss our opinions based on our gender?" "I dismissed your opinions based on your lack of relevant experience in building and managing significant wealth," Grant clarified, but his initial phrasing had revealed more than he intended. Brooke felt the baby kick hard, as if responding to her elevated heart rate and stress hormones. "Grant, you're way out of line." "I'm out of line for applying business principles to a business decision, for refusing to let pregnancy hormones and misguided sympathy cloud rational judgment." The reference to pregnancy hormones was the final straw for Dorothy. "Mr. Whitmore, you will not attribute my daughter's reasoned opinions to hormonal changes." That's both medically ignorant and personally insulting. Your daughter, Grant said, his voice rising again, is 7 months pregnant and clearly not thinking with her usual clarity. Pregnancy affects cognitive function and emotional regulation. It's a documented medical fact. What's documented, Dorothy said coldly, is that pregnancy doesn't impair intelligence or judgment. What does impair judgment is arrogance and contempt for other people's experiences. Tyler clutched his scholarship folder, wishing he could disappear. The meeting had spiraled far beyond anything he'd anticipated, and he felt responsible for creating the situation that had triggered such hostility. Maybe I should go, Tyler said again, his voice barely audible. No, Brooke said firmly, using the desk to help herself stand. You shouldn't have to leave because someone can't behave civilly during a scholarship interview. Grant's face darkened further. Civil, I'm being perfectly civil while trying to protect my financial interests from misguided charity impulses. Protecting your interests by insulting an honor student and questioning my mental capacity. Brooke's voice carried a strength that surprised everyone, including herself. I'm questioning your judgment, which has clearly been compromised by your condition, Grant said, his voice now loud enough to be heard clearly in the hallway. Through the window, the crowd of students and parents had grown larger. Maureen appeared in the doorway again, her face tight with concern. Principal Sullivan, should I call security? The situation in the hallway is getting difficult to manage. Dorothy looked at the crowd, then at Grant's increasingly aggressive posture, then at her pregnant daughter's pale face. Her judicial experience told her this was heading towards something worse than embarrassment. Yes, Maureen, ask Walter to come to the office. Please. You're calling security on me. Grant's voice rose to near shouting level. For conducting a business meeting. I'm calling security because your behavior is becoming threatening and disruptive, Dorothy said calmly, her judicial training keeping her voice level despite her rising anger. Threatening. Grant stepped closer to Brooke, who instinctively moved backward. I haven't threatened anyone. I've simply tried to conduct an intelligent conversation about financial responsibility while being lectured by people who have never built anything of value. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire everyone could smell, but not yet see. Dorothy recognized the moment when situations crossed from difficult to dangerous, and that moment had arrived. Walter Hayes appeared in the doorway, his security guard uniform lending official weight to his presence. At 45, he'd spent 15 years keeping peace at Roosevelt High and could read trouble from across a crowded hallway. Principal Sullivan, is everything all right? Walter, please stand by. We're having a discussion that's gotten a bit heated. Grant turned toward the security guard with obvious disdain. This is a private meeting about scholarship funding. Your presence is unnecessary and inappropriate. Sir, I'm here at the principal's request to ensure everyone's safety, Walter said calmly, positioning himself near the door, but not blocking the exit. Everyone's safety. Grant's voice rose another notch. From what a business conversation about educational funding. Through the windows, the crowd had grown to include not just students, but several parents who'd arrived for evening activities. Heather Williams, a parent volunteer, pressed closer to the glass, clearly concerned by what she could see of the confrontation. Tyler remained frozen in his chair, his scholarship folder clutched against his chest like a shield. The meeting that was supposed to secure his future had become something entirely different and infinitely more frightening. Grant, Brooke said quietly, maybe we should continue this conversation at home. We'll continue this conversation right here until I get satisfactory answers about how my money will be spent. Grant said, his attention laser-focused on his wife. I'm tired of being undermined and contradicted in public by someone who should be supporting my decisions. Supporting your decisions doesn't mean I can't have opinions of my own, Brooke said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the room. Your opinions, Grant said, stepping even closer to where she stood behind her chair, have been clouded by pregnancy and sentimentality. You're not thinking rationally about the long-term implications of financial decisions? Dorothy moved protectively toward her daughter. Mr. Whitmore, you need to step back and lower your voice. I need to do nothing except evaluate this scholarship application using sound business principles, Grant snapped, which I can't do while being second-guessed by women who don't understand wealth management. Stop saying that, Brooke said, her voice stronger now. Stop dismissing everything I say because I'm pregnant or because I'm a woman. I'm an intelligent adult with my own thoughts and opinions. Grant's face flushed red with anger. Intelligence. You want to give away $50,000 to a kid from a broken home because you feel sorry for him? That's emotion, not intelligence. Tyler has earned this scholarship through years of hard work and academic excellence, Brooke said firmly. Recognizing merit isn't emotional. It's fair. Merit. Grant's laugh was harsh and cold. Merit is building a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. Merit is creating jobs and generating tax revenue. Merit is not getting good grades at a mediocre school while your mother works minimum wage jobs. Tyler flinched as if he'd been struck. The casual cruelty of reducing his mother's struggles to a character flaw was more painful than any direct insult. His mother works 2 jobs to support her family, Brooke said, her voice rising with righteous anger. That takes more courage and determination than most people ever show. His mother made poor life choices that created her situation, Grant shot back. I'm not obligated to subsidize other people's failures. Tyler isn't responsible for his parents' marriage, Brooke said, moving slightly away from Grant's looming presence. He's responsible for his own achievements, which are exceptional. He's responsible for proving he deserves investment, Grant corrected, his voice now loud enough that everyone in the hallway could hear clearly, which he hasn't done to my satisfaction. Dorothy saw the situation spiraling beyond control. Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can reschedule this meeting when everyone can discuss the matter calmly. I'm perfectly calm, Grant said, though his voice suggested otherwise. I'm simply trying to conduct business without emotional interference from people who don't understand the stakes involved. The stakes are a young man's future, Brooke said, her hand protectively over her belly as the baby responded to her stress with increased movement. Tyler has worked harder than most kids ever will. He deserves this chance. He deserves nothing except what he can earn on his own merit, Grant snapped. Just like everyone else in the real world. Then judge him on his merit, Brooke said, her voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone in the room. 4.0 grade point average, volunteer work, part-time job, leadership in student activities. If that's not merit, what is merit is results that matter in the real world, not participation trophies and grade inflation, Grant said dismissively. The insulting characterization of Tyler's achievements pushed Brooke past her breaking point. Tyler's achievements are real and significant. Your refusal to recognize them says more about your character than his. Grant went very still, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. My character. Dorothy recognized the moment when situations became irreversibly dangerous. Everyone needs to take a step back and calm down, but Grant was past the point of de-escalation. My character built the fortune that provides your lifestyle. My character created the foundation that this boy wants money from. Maybe you should consider my character before questioning it in public. Your money doesn't give you the right to demean people, Brooke said, standing straighter despite her advanced pregnancy. Tyler is a good kid who deserves respect, not contempt. Respect is earned, Grant said, his voice rising again. Not given away like participation trophies to anyone with a sad story. He's earned it through years of hard work and academic excellence, Brooke insisted. What more do you need to see? I need to see evidence that investment will yield appropriate returns, Grant said, his businessman mask slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. Not emotional appeals based on misguided sympathy. It's not misguided to recognize potential and help it flourish, Brooke said firmly. It's misguided to let pregnancy hormones override rational decision-making, Grant shot back. The reference to pregnancy hormones, delivered with such casual dismissiveness, pushed Dorothy's maternal instincts into overdrive. That's enough, Mr. Whitmore. It's not enough until my wife learns to support my decisions instead of undermining them in public, Grant said, his voice now clearly audible throughout the building. I'm not undermining anything, Brooke said, her voice steady but strained. I'm expressing my opinion about a deserving student. Your opinion is irrelevant, Grant said coldly. This is my money and my decision. Our money, Brooke corrected quietly. We're married. Grant's face darkened further. Marriage doesn't make you a business partner. Marriage makes you my wife, with specific roles and responsibilities. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Walter shifted position, moving slightly closer. Dorothy felt her judicial training warring with her maternal instincts. Those responsibilities, Brooks said carefully, don't include surrendering my right to have opinions. They include supporting your husband's decisions instead of questioning them in front of strangers, Grant said, gesturing toward Tyler and Walter. I'll always question decisions I think are wrong, Brooks said quietly but firmly. Even yours. The simple statement of independence seemed to hit Grant like a physical blow. His face flushed red, and his voice rose to a shout. Wrong. You think I'm wrong to protect my financial interests from charity cases and sob stories. I think you're wrong to dismiss a deserving student because of prejudice against his family situation, Brooks said, her voice remaining calm despite the storm swirling around her. Prejudice. Grant's voice cracked with rage. Business analysis is not prejudice. Economic reality is not prejudice. Refusing to subsidize failure is not prejudice. Refusing to help an honor student because his father left is prejudice, Brooks said firmly. Grant moved closer, his size and anger making him seem to fill the entire room. Don't lecture me about business decisions. You wouldn't know sound financial judgment if it bit you. I know fairness when I see it, Brooke replied, not backing down despite his intimidating presence. And I know cruelty when I see it too. Cruelty? Grant's voice rose to near shouting. Protecting my assets from misguided charity is cruel. Attacking a 16-year-old honor student is cruel, Brooke said, her voice carrying conviction that surprised everyone, including herself. Grant stepped even closer, close enough that Brooke had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. That boy is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to my wife and unborn child, which means making smart financial decisions, not emotional ones. Smart financial decisions include investing in education and community development, Brooks said, not backing away despite his looming presence. My wife's job is to support my decisions, not second-guess them in public, Grant said, his voice now loud enough to carry clearly into the hallway. My job is to be your partner, not your employee, Brooks said quietly but firmly. The statement seemed to break something inside Grant. His face went red, then white, then red again. Walter stepped forward, sensing danger. Sir, I need you to step back from Mrs. Whitmore. This is a private conversation between husband and wife, Grant snarled without taking his eyes off Brooke. Grant, Dorothy said with all the authority of her judicial experience, you need to calm down and step away from my daughter. But Grant was past the point of hearing reason or recognizing authority. Your daughter needs to learn her place and stop embarrassing me in public. My place, Brooks said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt, is not beneath you or behind you. It's beside you as an equal partner. Grant's hand moved so fast that everyone in the room froze in shock. The slap echoed through the office like a gunshot, the sound so sharp and unexpected that Tyler dropped his folder and Walter started forward instinctively. Brooke stumbled backward, her hand flying to her reddened cheek, her eyes wide with shock and betrayal. The baby kicked frantically as her stress hormones spiked, and she placed her other hand protectively over her belly. The silence that followed lasted only seconds but felt like hours. Through the windows, the crowd of students and parents stood frozen, having witnessed something they could barely process. Dorothy's maternal instincts exploded into pure rage. That's the last time you'll ever touch my daughter. The office erupted into controlled chaos. Walter moved immediately toward Grant, his training taking over as he assessed the threat level and positioned himself between the aggressor and the victim. Sir, I need you to step back and put your hands where I can see them, Walter said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd dealt with volatile situations for 15 years. Grant seemed surprised by his own actions, his hands still raised slightly as if frozen in the aftermath of the slap. She was being disrespectful. She was undermining me in front of strangers. Dorothy was already on her phone, her judicial training overriding her maternal rage long enough to follow proper procedure. This is Principal Sullivan at Roosevelt High School. I need police and paramedics at the school immediately. We have a domestic violence incident involving a pregnant woman. Domestic violence! Grant's voice cracked with outrage. This is a marital disagreement, a private matter between husband and wife. Brooke remained motionless, her hand pressed to her cheek, staring at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. The man who'd courted her with flowers and expensive dinners, who'd promised to cherish and protect her, had just struck her in front of witnesses. Tyler sat frozen in his chair, his scholarship folders scattered on the floor, watching events unfold that had nothing to do with college funding and everything to do with power and control. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Walter asked Brooke gently, maintaining his position between her and Grant. "Do you need medical attention?" Brooke touched her cheek gingerly, feeling the heat and swelling already beginning. The baby is moving a lot. I'm having some cramping." Dorothy's maternal panic threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. "The paramedics are on their way, sweetheart. Just sit down and try to stay calm." "Calm," Grant's voice rose again. "She's creating drama over nothing. I barely touched her. She's fine." "You slapped a pregnant woman in front of witnesses," Walter said firmly. "That's assault. Sir, I need you to remain calm and keep your hands visible." Maureen appeared in the doorway, her face pale with shock. "Principal Sullivan, I've cleared the hallway, but there are parents demanding to know what's happening. Mrs. Williams insists on speaking with you." "Tell Mrs. Williams to wait in the main office," Dorothy said, her attention focused entirely on her daughter. "And call Dr. Stone at the hospital. Tell him we're bringing in a pregnant assault victim." "Assault victim?" Grant's voice cracked with disbelief. "This is insane. Brooke, tell them you're fine. Tell them this is just a misunderstanding." Brooke looked at her husband with eyes that seemed to see him clearly for the first time in 3 years. "I'm not fine, Grant, and this isn't a misunderstanding." The simple statement seemed to hit Grant harder than any accusation. "Brooke, you're overreacting. Pregnancy hormones are making you emotional. This is between us. It doesn't involve strangers and police." "The moment you struck her in front of witnesses, it stopped being between you," Dorothy said, her voice carrying 25 years of judicial authority. "This is now a criminal matter." Police sirens could be heard approaching the school. Grant's demeanor shifted from anger to panic as the reality of his situation began to penetrate his rage. "This is ridiculous. I'm a prominent businessman with community connections. One moment of frustration doesn't make me a criminal. One moment of violence against a pregnant woman makes you exactly that," Dorothy said coldly. Tyler finally found his voice. "Should I leave? I feel like I caused this by asking for the scholarship." "You didn't cause anything," Brooke said, her voice gentle despite her pain. "This isn't about you or the scholarship. This is about—" She paused, struggling to articulate what she was beginning to understand. "This is about control and respect." Grant moved toward her, causing Walter to step protectively forward. "Brooke, you know I love you. You know I'd never intentionally hurt you. The stress of business decisions, the pressure of providing for our family, sometimes it gets overwhelming. Overwhelming enough to hit your pregnant wife." Dorothy's voice could have cut glass. "I didn't hit her," Grant protested weakly. "It was just a slap, a momentary loss of control. It won't happen again." "You're right," Dorothy said firmly. "It won't happen again because you'll never have the opportunity." 2 police officers entered the office, their presence immediately changing the dynamics of the room. Officer Janet Martinez, a 15-year veteran of domestic violence calls, quickly assessed the situation. "Who called in the domestic violence report?" "I did," Dorothy said. "I'm Principal Sullivan. This is my daughter, Brooke Whitmore. Her husband struck her in front of multiple witnesses." Officer Martinez turned to Brooke with the gentle professionalism that came from years of dealing with traumatized victims. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "My cheek hurts, and I'm having some cramping," Brooke said quietly. "I'm 7 months pregnant." "The paramedics are right behind us," Officer Martinez assured her. "Can you tell me what happened?" Grant stepped forward, his businessman persona trying to reassert itself. "Officer, I'm Grant Whitmore of Whitmore Properties. This is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. My wife and I had a disagreement about a financial matter, and emotions got heated. Sir, I need you to remain quiet while I speak with the alleged victim," Officer Martinez said firmly. "Alleged victim." Grant's voice rose again. "She's my wife. We had an argument. This is a private family matter." The second officer, Tom Bradley, positioned himself near Grant. "Sir, domestic violence is never a private matter. Please step back and remain silent." Paramedic Sarah Chen entered with her partner, immediately focusing on Brooke. "Ma'am, I'm Sarah with City Paramedics. I understand you were struck and you're experiencing pregnancy complications." "The cramping started right after he hit me," Brooke said, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. "The baby has been moving frantically." "Let's get you checked out," Sarah said gently. "We're going to take you to the hospital for evaluation. Better safe than sorry with pregnancy involved." Grant moved toward his wife again, causing both officers to step forward. "I'm coming with her. I'm her husband." "Sir, you're not going anywhere near the victim right now," Officer Bradley said firmly. "Victim?" Grant's voice cracked with desperation. "She's my wife. We're having a baby together. This is our family." Dorothy felt her rage building again. "Your family? You just assaulted a pregnant woman in front of a room full of witnesses. You have no family rights at this moment." Heather Williams appeared in the doorway, despite Maureen's efforts to keep parents away. "Principal Sullivan, I saw what happened through the window. I'm willing to give a statement." "Ma'am, please wait in the main office," Officer Martinez said. "We'll take your statement shortly." But Heather wasn't moving. "I saw him hit her. I saw a grown man strike a pregnant woman. My daughter goes to school here, and I won't pretend I didn't see what I saw." Grant turned toward Heather with desperation in his voice. "You don't understand the context. You didn't hear the conversation. My wife was being disrespectful and undermining my authority. I understand that I saw domestic violence," Heather said firmly. "And I understand that there's no context that makes hitting a pregnant woman acceptable." Tyler still sat frozen, his scholarship dreams forgotten in the face of the violence he'd witnessed. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't asked for the meeting—" "Tyler," Brooke said gently as the paramedics prepared to transport her, "this has nothing to do with you. You did nothing wrong by asking for help with your education." "Listen to me," Grant said, his voice taking on a pleading tone as reality began to penetrate his anger. "Everyone is overreacting. Brooke, tell them you're fine. Tell them we can work this out at home." Brooke looked at her husband with eyes that held no recognition of the man she'd married. "I can't go home with you. Grant, I can't trust you not to hurt me again." The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. For the first time since the incident began, Grant seemed to understand that his actions had consequences beyond his ability to control or minimize. "You can't mean that," he whispered. "We're married. We're having a baby. This is just a misunderstanding." "The misunderstanding," Brooke said quietly as the paramedics helped her toward a wheelchair, "was thinking that marriage gave you the right to hit me." The ambulance ride to County General Hospital gave Brooke her first moments of relative peace in months. Sarah Chen monitored her vital signs while her partner drove through traffic that seemed to part automatically for emergency vehicles. "Your blood pressure is elevated, which is expected after trauma," Sarah explained gently. "The baby's heartbeat is strong, but we want the doctors to do a complete evaluation." Dorothy sat beside the stretcher, holding her daughter's hand and trying to process what she'd witnessed. 25 years on the bench had shown her every form of domestic violence, but seeing it happen to her own child created a rage that threatened to overwhelm her judicial training. "Mom," Brooke said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Dorothy's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. "What is it, sweetheart?" "This wasn't the first time." The words hit Dorothy like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "He's never hit me before, but—" Brooke paused, struggling to articulate experiences she'd been trained to minimize and excuse. "He controls everything. What I wear, where I go, who I talk to. He monitors my phone calls and reads my emails. He convinced me to quit teaching because he said my salary was embarrassing compared to his income." Sarah continued her medical assessment while listening to revelations that explained much about the patient's demeanor and responses. "When did this start?" Dorothy asked, her judicial mind already cataloging evidence and patterns. "Gradually, after we got married. At first it seemed protective, even romantic. He wanted to take care of me, to give me a better life than I could provide for myself. But then it became—" Brooke searched for words to describe the gradual erosion of her autonomy. "Suffocating, controlling. Everything had to be his way, his decision, his approval." Dorothy thought about the expensive clothes, the luxury car, the beautiful house that she'd interpreted as signs of her daughter's good fortune. The gifts, the clothes, the jewelry, were tools, Brooke finished, ways to show ownership and control. I couldn't work because wives of successful men don't need jobs. I couldn't drive myself places because he provided a driver. I couldn't make purchases without his approval because he managed our finances. Our finances! Dorothy's legal training kicked in. Do you have access to bank accounts, credit cards, investment information? I have a credit card with a monthly limit and a checking account he monitors. I don't know the details of his business holdings or our investments. He says I don't need to worry about complicated financial matters. Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with Dorothy. Financial abuse was a common component of domestic violence, designed to make victims dependent and unable to leave. Brooke, Dorothy said carefully, why didn't you tell me about this? Because I didn't recognize it at first, Brooke admitted, and because he was always careful to make it seem reasonable. Successful men take care of their wives. Pregnant women shouldn't stress about money matters. He had explanations for everything that made his control seem like love. The ambulance pulled into the hospital emergency bay, temporarily interrupting the conversation. As they transferred Brooke to the emergency room, Dorothy's mind raced through implications and necessary actions. Dr. Richard Stone, the emergency physician on duty, had extensive experience with domestic violence cases. His calm professionalism immediately put Brooke at ease as he began his examination. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to check your injuries and evaluate the baby's condition. Can you tell me exactly what happened? As Brooke recounted the incident, Dr. Stone documented everything with the precision that came from knowing his medical records might become legal evidence. The slap was with an open hand, he asked, examining the redness and swelling on her cheek. Yes, hard enough to knock me backward into the desk. Dr. Stone photographed the injury from multiple angles, his documentation thorough and professional. And any other physical contact or injuries? Not today, but... Brooke hesitated, looking at her mother. It's okay, Dorothy encouraged. Tell the doctor everything. There have been times when he grabbed my arms hard enough to leave bruises, times when he pushed me or cornered me against walls. Nothing I could report because he was always careful not to leave obvious marks. Dr. Stone continued his examination, his trained eye noting evidence that supported Brooke's account. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm seeing some bruising on your upper arms that appears to be in various stages of healing. Can you tell me about those? Brooke looked down at her arms, seeing for the first time what medical training taught Dr. Stone to recognize immediately. Last week, he grabbed me when I suggested we needed to hire a night nurse for after the baby comes. He said I was being wasteful with his money. And the older bruises. 2 weeks ago, when I asked if I could visit my sister Claire in Denver, he said travel wasn't safe in my condition, but he was angry that I'd made plans without asking permission first. Dorothy felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The phone calls that always ended when he came into the room, the canceled lunch dates, the way you stopped visiting. He said frequent family visits made me too emotional and stressed. He said pregnancy required calm environments and minimal outside influences. Dr. Stone completed his physical examination and prepared for the ultrasound to check the baby's condition. The pattern you're describing is consistent with systematic abuse designed to isolate victims from support systems. But he never hit me before today, Brooke said, as if this distinction mattered. Physical violence is usually the final escalation in a pattern of psychological and emotional abuse. Dr. Stone explained gently. What happened today was serious, but it's rarely the beginning of abusive behavior. The ultrasound showed a healthy baby with strong vital signs, bringing relief to everyone in the room. But Dr. Stone's expression remained serious as he reviewed Brooke's medical history. Mrs. Whitmore, when was your last prenatal appointment? 3 weeks ago. Grant said weekly appointments were excessive and expensive. He preferred to space them out more. Dorothy's legal mind immediately recognized another control mechanism. Brooke, proper prenatal care requires more frequent visits in the 3rd trimester. That's correct, Dr. Stone confirmed. Limiting medical care is another form of abuse, particularly dangerous during pregnancy. A knock on the door interrupted the examination. Officer Martinez entered with a female detective, Lisa Chen, who specialized in domestic violence cases. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Detective Chen. I understand you've been the victim of domestic violence, and I'd like to take your statement when you're ready. She's not ready, Dorothy said protectively. Actually, Mom, I think I am ready, Brooke said quietly. I'm ready to tell the truth about everything. Detective Chen settled into a chair beside the hospital bed, her recorder ready and her manner professional but compassionate. Take your time, Mrs. Whitmore. Start wherever feels comfortable. I think, Brooke said slowly, it started even before we got married. I just didn't recognize it as abuse because it was wrapped in flowers and expensive dinners and promises of taking care of me forever. As Brooke began to recount 3 years of systematic control, isolation, and psychological manipulation, Dorothy realized that today's violence was not an aberration, but an inevitable escalation. The millionaire husband who'd seemed like her daughter's salvation had actually been her captor. And now, finally, the cage door was opening. Dr. Stone's examination revealed more than anyone had expected. Under the careful lighting of the emergency room, evidence of systematic abuse became undeniably clear. Brooke's expensive, carefully chosen clothes had hidden a pattern of injuries that told the story of months of escalating violence. Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Stone said gently, I need to document some additional findings. With your permission, I'd like to photograph some bruising that indicates this incident wasn't isolated. Brooke looked at her mother with confusion. What do you mean your upper arms show bruising in multiple stages of healing? Dr. Stone explained. Some approximately 1 week old, others older. The patterns suggest repeated grabbing with significant force. Dorothy felt sick as she saw the evidence laid out in clinical detail. Brooke, you said he grabbed you, but this looks like abuse, Detective Chen finished. Mrs. Whitmore, this pattern of injuries supports charges beyond today's assault. Brooke stared at the photographs Dr. Stone was taking, seeing her own arms as if for the first time. The expensive long sleeves Grant preferred suddenly made terrible sense. I thought I bruised easily because of the pregnancy. Pregnancy can cause easier bruising, Dr. Stone confirmed, but not in these specific patterns. These injuries are consistent with forceful gripping and restraint. A commotion in the hallway interrupted the documentation. Grant's voice could be heard arguing with hospital security, demanding to see his wife. That's my wife in there. I have spousal rights. You cannot keep me from seeing her. Sir, you need to calm down, a security guard replied firmly. The patient has requested no visitors except family members she specifically approved. Dorothy rose from her chair, her maternal instincts flaring. I'll handle this. Mom, don't, Brooke said quickly. He'll try to manipulate you. He's very good at making his behavior seem reasonable. Mrs. Whitmore is right, Detective Chen said. Abusers often use family dynamics to regain access to victims. Your daughter needs protection right now, not confrontation. Dr. Stone continued his examination, noting details that painted a picture of systematic physical abuse hidden beneath expensive clothes and public charm. The bruising on your ribs is approximately 2 weeks old. Can you tell me about that? Brooke touched her side gingerly, remembering. I suggested hiring a doula for the birth. He said it was unnecessary expense and pushed me against the kitchen counter. He said I was getting ideas above my station. Ideas above your station. Dorothy's voice carried the outrage of a woman who'd spent decades fighting for justice. He uses language like that, Brooke explained. Reminders of my place in the marriage hierarchy. My job is to be grateful for his provision and support his decisions. Detective Chen made notes that would become crucial evidence. Mrs. Whitmore, did anyone else witness his physical aggression? Not really. He was always careful about timing and location. Until today. What was different about today? Brooke considered the question carefully. Tyler, the scholarship meeting threatened Grant's control over the narrative. He couldn't make Tyler's achievements fit his worldview about poverty and worthiness. Dr. Ronnie Stone completed his documentation and prepared to discuss immediate medical concerns. Mrs. Whitmore, your blood pressure remains elevated, and you're showing signs of stress that could affect the pregnancy. I'm recommending overnight observation. Overnight, Brooke's voice carried panic. Grant will expect me home. He'll be angry if I stay here without permission. The statement revealed how completely Grant's control had invaded her thinking. Dorothy and Detective Chen exchanged meaningful looks. Brooke, Dorothy said gently, you don't need permission to receive medical care. You don't need permission to protect yourself and your baby. But he'll say I'm being dramatic, creating problems where none exist. He'll say I'm embarrassing him publicly. He hit you in front of witnesses, Detective Chen said firmly. The only person who should be embarrassed is him. Dr. Stone pulled Dorothy aside for a private conversation. Principal Sullivan, your daughter shows classic signs of psychological abuse conditioning. Her responses indicate systematic undermining of her decision-making confidence. What does that mean for her recovery? Physical healing is straightforward. Psychological recovery from this level of manipulation takes time and professional support. She'll need counseling to rebuild her sense of personal autonomy. Claire Thompson, Brooke's sister, arrived from Denver after Dorothy's emergency phone call. At 38, Claire was a successful software engineer who'd never married, something Grant regularly criticized as selfishness and career obsession. Oh God, Brooke, Claire said, rushing to her sister's bedside. When Mom called, I couldn't believe. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? The baby is fine, Brooke said, tears finally beginning to flow. But I don't think I am. Claire examined the photographic evidence Dr. Stone had collected, her technical mind processing patterns and implications. Brooke, this didn't happen today. This is systematic. I know, I'm starting to understand that. Why didn't you tell me when we talked on the phone? Why didn't you say anything? Because he monitored my calls, because I didn't have words for what was happening, because I thought it was normal marriage adjustment. Claire's anger was immediate and focused. Normal, Brooke. This is criminal assault. This is domestic violence. Detective Chen took advantage of Claire's arrival to expand her investigation. Ms. Thompson, did you have concerns about your sister's marriage? From the beginning, Claire said immediately, Grant isolated her from family and friends. He controlled her finances and limited her independence. But Brooke said it was love, protection, care. Did you witness any concerning behavior directly? Last Christmas, when they visited Denver, Grant criticized everything Brooke did, her food choices, her conversation topics, her clothes. He corrected her constantly and spoke about her like she wasn't present. Dorothy realized she'd witnessed similar behavior, but interpreted it as Grant's perfectionist standards rather than abusive control. The expensive gifts, the luxury lifestyle, Claire continued. I thought they were red flags, not green ones. Too much, too fast, too controlling. Dr. Stone returned with additional test results. Mrs. Whitmore, I've consulted with our obstetrics team. Given the trauma and stress, we're recommending complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Complete bed rest, Brooke's voice carried panic again. Grant will never accept that. He'll say I'm being lazy, manipulating the situation. Grant's opinions are no longer relevant to your medical care, Dorothy said firmly. But he controls our insurance, our finances. If he doesn't approve the medical care, Detective Chen leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, we need to discuss protective orders and your safety options. You cannot return home to your abuser. But where else can I go? He owns our house, our cars, everything. I don't have money or credit cards he doesn't control. You can come home with me, Dorothy said immediately. You can stay as long as necessary. Mom, he'll make trouble for you. He has connections with political figures, business leaders. He'll find ways to cause problems. Let him try, Dorothy said with the confidence of someone who'd spent 25 years dispensing justice. I have connections too, and mine are motivated by justice rather than money. Claire pulled out her phone. I'm calling my lawyer in Denver. She specializes in domestic violence cases and asset protection. We need to move fast before Grant has time to hide financial assets. Hide assets? Brooke looked confused. Brooke, Detective Chen said gently. Abusers often use financial manipulation to prevent victims from leaving. We need to secure your legal rights to marital property before he can claim sole ownership. The hospital room filled with the quiet efficiency of people who'd dealt with domestic violence cases before. Dorothy made calls to judicial colleagues. Claire contacted legal resources, and Detective Chen coordinated with prosecutors. Through it all, Brooke lay in the hospital bed, slowly beginning to understand that her marriage had never been a partnership but a carefully constructed prison. The millionaire husband who'd promised to cherish and protect her had systematically stripped away her independence, autonomy, and self-worth. But for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't alone in recognizing the truth. And for the first time since saying "I do," she had people fighting for her rather than controlling her. The cage door wasn't just opening anymore. It was being torn from its hinges. By evening, Brooke's hospital room had been transformed into an impromptu legal war room. Dorothy had called in favors from her judicial network. Claire had connected with domestic violence attorneys, and Detective Chen had coordinated with the prosecutor's office to ensure comprehensive charges against Grant. The assault charge is straightforward, explained Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos, who'd arrived to discuss the case. Multiple witnesses, clear physical evidence, documented injuries, but we can build a much stronger case that addresses the pattern of abuse. Dorothy reviewed the legal documents spread across the rolling bed table. What additional charges are you considering? Stalking, criminal intimidation, financial abuse, and possibly kidnapping if we can prove he unlawfully restrained her movement or freedom? Kidnapping. Brooke's voice carried surprise. Preventing someone from leaving through threats or control can constitute unlawful restraint, Ada Santos explained. Your testimony about needing permission for activities, monitored communications, and restricted access to transportation could support those charges. Claire looked up from her laptop where she'd been researching Grant's business holdings. I found something interesting. Grant's foundation that Tyler was applying to, it's primarily funded through shell corporations that hide the actual funding sources. What does that mean? Dorothy asked. It means Grant may be using charitable giving for tax evasion or money laundering. If the foundation is a front for illegal financial activity, that adds federal charges to his problems. Detective Chen added her findings to the growing case file. We've also discovered that the previous domestic violence complaint against Grant was more serious than initially reported. His ex-girlfriend filed charges but dropped them after Grant's attorneys contacted her employer and threatened her job. He has a pattern of using financial pressure to silence victims, Ada Santos noted. That supports our argument for enhanced charges based on systematic criminal behavior. Dr. Ostone entered with the final medical documentation. Mrs. Whitmore, the photographs and medical records clearly establish a timeline of abuse spanning several months. This evidence will be crucial for prosecutors. Dorothy's judicial experience helped her understand the legal strategy taking shape. You're building a RICO case, aren't you? Treating Grant's abuse as organized criminal activity? Exactly, Ada Santos confirmed. Domestic violence, witness intimidation, financial fraud, and tax evasion can be prosecuted as a criminal enterprise under federal statutes. Brooke listened to the legal discussions with growing amazement. I thought this was just a bad marriage. I didn't realize it was criminal. Systematic abuse is always criminal, Claire said firmly. The fact that you were married doesn't give him the right to control, intimidate, or assault you. A commotion in the hallway interrupted their planning. Grant's voice could be heard arguing with hospital administrators about visiting rights and medical decisions. That's my wife and my unborn child, Grant insisted loudly. I have legal rights that cannot be superseded by hospital policies. Ada Santos immediately called for additional security. He's violating the preliminary restraining order by coming here. Restraining order? Brooke looked confused. Emergency protective order issued this afternoon, Detective Chen explained. Grant is prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly, approaching within 500 feet, or interfering with your medical care. Dorothy moved to the window overlooking the parking lot, where she could see Grant's Mercedes surrounded by police vehicles. He's not just violating the restraining order. He's doing it publicly, with media present. Media, Claire joined her mother at the window. Why would there be media? Grant called them, Ada Santos said grimly. Classic abuser tactic. Control the narrative by claiming he's the victim of false accusations and vindictive women. On the parking lot below, Grant stood before news cameras, his expensive suit and carefully groomed appearance lending credibility to his performance. Even from a distance, his body language conveyed wounded innocence, rather than criminal guilt. He's spinning this as a misunderstanding, Dorothy observed, making himself the victim of an overreaction. Detective Chen's radio crackled with updates from officers monitoring the situation. Suspect is making public statements claiming victim is mentally unstable due to pregnancy complications. Claims witnesses misunderstood normal marital discussion. Normal marital discussion. Brooks' voice carried bitter laughter. He slapped me hard enough to knock me backward in front of a room full of people. Abusers always minimize their actions, Ada Santos explained. He'll claim it was a light tap, a moment of stress, completely blown out of proportion by hysterical women. Claire's laptop chimed with news alerts. It's already online. Local business leader falsely accused of domestic violence by unstable wife. Anonymous sources claim pregnancy complications affecting victim's mental state. Anonymous sources. Dorothy's voice carried prosecutorial suspicion. Grant's public relations team, Ada Santos said. He's had hours to coordinate a media strategy designed to discredit Brooks' testimony before trial. Dr. Stone reviewed the medical files with fresh urgency. Mrs. Whitmore, given the media attention and your husband's apparent strategy, I'm recommending we transfer you to a secure facility with enhanced privacy protections. You mean hide me? Brooke asked. I mean protect you from a coordinated campaign designed to undermine your credibility and safety, Dr. Stone clarified. Ada Santos pulled out her phone to coordinate the transfer. We have safe houses specifically designed for domestic violence victims whose cases involve wealthy defendants with extensive resources. Kim, what about my life? My home? My things? Brooke asked, the reality of her situation beginning to sink in. Your life is what we're protecting, Dorothy said firmly. Everything else can be replaced or recovered through legal proceedings. Claire closed her laptop decisively. I'm taking leave from work to stay with you through this. You're not facing this alone. We're all staying, Dorothy added. Grant may have money and connections, but we have something more powerful, the truth and the law. Detective Chen received another radio update. Suspect has been arrested for violating the restraining order. His attorneys are en route to the station. Good, Ada Santos said. Violating a protective order within hours of it being issued demonstrates exactly the kind of controlling behavior we need to prove in court. Brooke watched through the window as Grant was led away in handcuffs, his media performance ending abruptly with the reality of legal consequences. For the first time in 3 years, she was watching her husband face accountability rather than wielding power. What happens next? She asked quietly. Next, Ada Santos said, we build a case so comprehensive and well-documented that Grant's wealth and connections become irrelevant to the outcome. And next, Dorothy added, you start rebuilding your life on your own terms, with people who love you instead of controlling you. As evening settled over the hospital, Brooke felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not the false hope of thinking an abuser might change, but the real hope that came from having allies, evidence, and legal protection. The millionaire husband who'd promised to cherish and protect her had revealed his true nature in front of witnesses. Now those witnesses were becoming her advocates, her protectors, and her path to freedom. Grant's arrest made the 11 o'clock news, but by morning his high-powered legal team had crafted a counter-narrative that shifted blame back to Brooke. Defense attorney Marcus Kellerman, known for representing wealthy clients in high-profile cases, held a press conference outside the county jail. My client, Grant Whitmore, is the victim of a vindictive campaign orchestrated by a mentally unstable wife and her activist mother, Kellerman announced to gathered reporters. Mr. Whitmore is a respected businessman and philanthropist who's being destroyed by false accusations. Dorothy watched the press conference from Brooke's hospital room, her judicial experience recognizing the sophisticated character assassination taking place. He's not just defending himself, he's destroying your credibility preemptively. How can he do that? Brooke asked, still weak from the previous day's trauma. Money, and Claire said grimly, scrolling through social media posts that had appeared overnight. He's hired a crisis management firm to flood the internet with stories about unstable pregnant women making false accusations. Ada Santos arrived with disturbing news. Grant's team filed an emergency petition claiming you're mentally incompetent due to pregnancy-related psychosis. They're requesting court-ordered psychological evaluation and emergency custody of the unborn child. The words hit Brooke like a physical blow. Custody. The baby isn't even born yet. In cases where the mother is deemed unfit, courts can assign custody to fathers or other relatives, Ada Santos explained. Grant is claiming you're a danger to the unborn child due to mental instability. Detective Chen added her findings to the mounting evidence of Grant's strategy. We've discovered Grant has been documenting your behavior for months. Hidden cameras in your home, recorded phone conversations, detailed logs of what he claims are erratic or irrational behaviors. He's been building a case against me. Brooke's voice carried shock and betrayal. Systematic documentation is common among abusers planning to claim their victims are unstable. Ada Santos confirmed. They create evidence to support claims of mental illness or incompetence. Dorothy's rage was carefully controlled but unmistakable. He planned this. The isolation, the control, the documentation. He was preparing to have Brooke declared unfit if she ever tried to leave. Claire discovered additional troubling information. I found Grant's internet search history through his business computer. He's been researching involuntary commitment procedures, parental rights termination, and asset protection in divorce proceedings. Asset protection. Ada Santos looked up from her legal notes. Strategies for hiding wealth during divorce proceedings. Grant has been moving money through offshore accounts and shell corporations for months. Dr. Stone entered with medical documentation that contradicted Grant's claims. Mrs. Whitmore, I've completed comprehensive psychological and neurological evaluations. You show no signs of mental illness, pregnancy-related psychosis, or cognitive impairment. But Grant's lawyers are claiming pregnancy has made me unstable, Brooke said. Grant's lawyers are claiming what serves their legal strategy. Dr. Stone replied. Medical evidence doesn't support their assertions. Ada Santos reviewed the medical reports with growing confidence. This actually strengthens our case. Grant's false claims about your mental state demonstrate the manipulation and gaslighting that characterize systematic abuse. Detective Chen's radio crackled with updates from the courthouse. Grant's emergency petition is being heard this afternoon. Judge Patricia Reeves presiding. Dorothy knew Judge Reeves well from their years serving together. Patricia is experienced with domestic violence cases. She won't be easily manipulated by expensive lawyers and false narratives. But what if Grant's documentation convinces her? Brooke asked fearfully. Then we present counter-evidence, Ada Santos said firmly. Medical records, witness statements, and documented proof of Grant's systematic abuse. Tyler Brooks appeared in the doorway, accompanied by his mother Lisa and Principal Sullivan's secretary Maureen. Mrs. Whitmore, we heard about what happened. We wanted to make sure you know we'll testify about what we witnessed. Lisa Brooks, despite her exhaustion from working 2 jobs, spoke with quiet dignity. Mr. Whitmore said terrible things about our family, but what he did to you was worse. No one deserves to be treated that way. Maureen added her support. I've been documenting Grant's controlling behavior during your visits to the school. His criticism of your appearance, his interruption of your conversations, his dismissive treatment, it's all in my notes. You were documenting his behavior, Dorothy asked with surprise. My training in recognizing domestic violence signs, Maureen explained. I was worried about Brooke but didn't know how to intervene without making things worse. Tyler spoke up with teenage earnestness. Mrs. Whitmore, I feel responsible for what happened. If I hadn't asked for the scholarship... Tyler, Brooke said gently, you did nothing wrong. Grant's violence is his responsibility, not yours. Claire pulled out her laptop with new information. I've been researching Grant's previous relationships. His ex-girlfriend in Chicago, the one who dropped the domestic violence charges, she's willing to testify about similar patterns of abuse. The ex-girlfriend he silenced through employment threats. Ada Santos asked. She's a software engineer now, financially independent and protected by union contracts. She can't be intimidated the way she was 5 years ago. Detective Chen received another radio update. Grant's team is at the courthouse filing additional motions, requesting immediate release on recognizance and dismissal of charges based on victim recantation. Victim recantation. Brooke looked confused. They're claiming you've recanted your accusations, Ada Santos explained. Standard tactic. forge documents, or manipulate statements to suggest the victim has changed her story. Dorothy's judicial training kicked into high gear. We need to get to that courthouse immediately. If Grant's lawyers present false evidence of recantation, it could undermine everything. Dr. Stone prepared discharge papers with medical recommendations. Mrs. Whitmore is stable for transport but requires ongoing monitoring. I'm recommending continued protection and limited stress exposure. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Brooke looked out at the media circus that had gathered in the parking lot. How did my life become a public spectacle? Because your millionaire husband decided to use his wealth and connections to destroy you rather than accept responsibility for his actions, Claire said bluntly. But we're going to stop him, Dorothy added with judicial determination. Grant may have money and lawyers, but we have something he can't buy or manipulate: the truth. Ada Santos coordinated their departure with security escorts. The courthouse has increased security due to media attention. You'll be protected from harassment and intrusion. As they left the hospital, Brooke realized she was no longer the isolated, controlled wife who'd entered Roosevelt High School 24 hours earlier. She was surrounded by advocates, protected by law enforcement, and supported by evidence that would speak louder than Grant's money. The counterattack had begun, but so had her defense. And for the first time in 3 years, the odds were in her favor. The courthouse buzzed with activity as media crews positioned themselves for maximum coverage of what local news had dubbed the Millionaire's downfall. Judge Patricia Reeves had cleared her afternoon docket to hear emergency motions in what was rapidly becoming a high-profile domestic violence case. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Reeves, the bailiff announced as the packed courtroom came to attention. Judge Reeves, a veteran of 20 years on the bench, surveyed the crowded room with the calm authority that came from dealing with every variety of human drama. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her reading glasses reflected the courtroom lights as she reviewed the case files. We're here on emergency motions in the case of State versus Grant Whitmore, Judge Reeves announced. Mr. Kellerman, I understand you're requesting immediate release and dismissal of charges. Defense attorney Marcus Kellerman rose with practiced confidence. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman who's been wrongfully accused by a mentally unstable wife. We have documentation proving Mrs. Whitmore suffers from pregnancy-related psychosis and has a history of making false accusations. Ada Santos stood immediately. Objection. Your Honor, defense is making medical claims not supported by evidence. Sustained. Mr. Kellerman, do you have medical documentation to support your claims? Kellerman presented a folder with apparent confidence. Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Harrison Webb, a psychiatrist retained by Mr. Whitmore, has evaluated Mrs. Whitmore's behavior patterns and determined she suffers from delusional thinking exacerbated by pregnancy hormones. Your Honor, Ada Santos interjected. Dr. Webb has never examined Mrs. Whitmore. His evaluation is based solely on biased information provided by the defendant. Judge Reeves examined the documents with growing skepticism. Mr. Kellerman, this appears to be an evaluation of behavior descriptions rather than direct medical examination. Do you have actual medical records from treating physicians? Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore has been isolated from proper medical care by extremist family members who encourage her delusions about domestic violence. Dorothy felt her judicial training warring with maternal outrage. The lies were so blatant, so easily disproven, yet spoken with such confidence that they might convince someone unfamiliar with the evidence. Your Honor, Ada Santos said, rising with her own documentation. We have comprehensive medical records from Dr. Richard Stone at County General, who conducted thorough psychological and neurological evaluations yesterday. Mrs. Whitmore shows no signs of mental illness or cognitive impairment. Judge Reeves reviewed Dr. Stone's actual medical documentation, her expression growing stern as she compared it to the defense's claims. Mr. Kellerman, your psychiatric evaluation appears to contradict actual medical evidence. Do you care to explain this discrepancy? Before Kellerman could respond, the courtroom doors opened to admit an unexpected witness. Dr. Harrison Webb himself entered, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with the defense table. Your Honor, Dr. Webb said, approaching the bench without invitation, I need to address statements made in my name. Judge Reeves raised an eyebrow. Dr. Webb, you're not scheduled to testify? No, Your Honor. But I understand my evaluation has been misrepresented. I specifically stated that remote evaluation based on third-party descriptions cannot constitute legitimate psychiatric diagnosis. Kellerman's confidence visibly cracked. Your Honor, Dr. Webb's initial assessment, term, was preliminary and explicitly qualified as insufficient for medical diagnosis. Dr. Webb interrupted. I informed Mr. Whitmore's representatives that proper evaluation would require direct examination of the patient, which has not occurred. Judge Reeves turned her attention fully to Dr. Webb. Are you saying the evaluation presented by defense counsel is invalid? I'm saying it was misrepresented. My actual report states that the described behaviors could have multiple explanations and that psychiatric diagnosis requires direct patient contact and comprehensive testing. Ada Santos seized the opportunity. Your Honor, this demonstrates the defense's willingness to present false evidence to support baseless claims. Judge Reeves was clearly displeased with the defense's tactics. Mr. Kellerman, do you have any actual evidence to support your claims about Mrs. Whitmore's mental state? Kellerman attempted to recover. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation of erratic behavior patterns. Documented by whom? Judge Reeves asked pointedly. By Mr. Whitmore himself, as a concerned husband monitoring his wife's declining mental health. So the defendant documented alleged mental illness in his wife, then used that documentation to support claims of mental illness. Do you see the circular logic problem here? Counselor? The courtroom fell silent as Judge Reeves's question hung in the air. Kellerman's face flushed as he realized the fundamental flaw in his argument had been exposed in front of packed gallery and media representatives. Your Honor, Kellerman stammered, Mr. Whitmore was documenting concerning behaviors out of genuine concern for his wife's welfare. Mr. Kellerman, Judge Reeves interrupted with judicial authority honed over 2 decades. Are you asking this court to accept that the defendant documented his wife's alleged mental illness, then conveniently used that same documentation to defend against domestic violence charges? That seems remarkably convenient timing. Ada Santos rose with additional evidence. Your Honor, we've discovered that Mr. Whitmore's documentation coincides exactly with Mrs. Whitmore's attempts to assert independence or question his decisions. The pattern suggests manipulation rather than genuine concern. Detective Chen was called to present her findings. Your Honor, our investigation revealed hidden cameras throughout the defendant's home, recorded phone conversations without consent, and detailed logs that focus primarily on Mrs. Whitmore's interactions with family members and friends. Hidden cameras. Judge Reeves looked at the defense table with obvious disapproval. Mr. Kellerman, is your client claiming spousal surveillance was motivated by mental health concerns? Kellerman consulted quickly with Grant, who sat rigid in his expensive suit, his carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. Your Honor, Mr. Whitmore was concerned about his wife's safety and the welfare of their unborn child. Was Mrs. Whitmore aware of this surveillance? Judge Reeves asked. Not specifically, but Mr. Kellerman, secret surveillance of one's spouse without consent is illegal in this state, regardless of purported motivation. You're asking me to excuse criminal behavior by claiming it was motivated by concern for the victim. Ada Santos presented additional evidence. Your Honor, we also have testimony from school personnel who witnessed Mr. Whitmore's controlling and aggressive behavior during the incident that led to these charges. Principal Dorothy Sullivan was sworn in as a witness. Her 25 years of judicial experience gave her testimony particular weight as she described what she'd observed. Mr. Whitmore systematically undermined his wife's confidence and autonomy, Dorothy testified. He corrected her posture, criticized her opinions, and became increasingly aggressive when she expressed independent thoughts. The violence was not spontaneous, it was the culmination of escalating control and intimidation. Did you witness the actual assault? Ada Santos asked. Yes, Mr. Whitmore struck Mrs. Whitmore with sufficient force to knock her backward into furniture. She's 7 months pregnant. The blow was deliberate and calculated, not accidental or minor. Kellerman attempted cross-examination. Principal Sullivan, isn't it true that you have personal bias against my client due to family loyalty? Dorothy's response carried judicial authority. Mr. Kellerman, I have 25 years of experience observing domestic violence cases from the bench. My observations are based on professional training, not family loyalty. I know the difference between marital disagreement and systematic abuse. But you're emotionally invested in protecting your daughter. I'm legally and morally invested in protecting victims of domestic violence, Dorothy corrected firmly. My daughter happens to be one of those victims, but my testimony is based on observable behavior patterns I've seen in hundreds of cases. Judge Reeves intervened. Mr. Kellerman, Principal Sullivan's judicial experience makes her testimony particularly credible regarding domestic violence patterns. Unless you have evidence of bias beyond family relationship, I'm accepting her observations as expert witness testimony. Tyler Brooks was called next, his teenage earnestness lending authenticity to his account. Mr. Whitmore said cruel things about my family, but what scared me was how he treated Mrs. Whitmore. He got angry when she defended me, like she wasn't allowed to have opinions different from his. Did you witness the assault? Ada Santos asked. Yes, ma'am. He hit her hard enough that everyone in the room froze. It wasn't a tap or an accident. It was meant to hurt her and scare her. Kellerman's cross-examination revealed his desperation. Tyler, isn't it true that you wanted the scholarship money so badly you'd say anything to help Mrs. Whitmore's case? Tyler's response showed wisdom beyond his years. Sir, I don't want scholarship money from someone who hits pregnant women. Some things are more important than money. The answer clearly resonated with Judge Reeves, who made notes while Tyler returned to his seat. Maureen Banks testified about Grant's pattern of controlling behavior during school visits. He monitored Mrs. Whitmore's conversations, criticized her appearance, and spoke about her as if she weren't present. I documented these behaviors because they matched domestic violence warning signs from our training. You have professional training in recognizing domestic violence? Ada Santos asked. Yes, all school personnel receive annual training because we're often the first to recognize signs of family abuse. Mr. Whitmore's behavior toward his wife raised immediate red flags. Heather Williams, the parent who'd witnessed the assault, provided compelling testimony about Grant's public facade versus private behavior. Before the meeting, Mr. Whitmore was charming and professional in the hallway, but through the office windows, we could see him becoming increasingly aggressive and intimidating. When he struck Mrs. Whitmore, his mask completely dropped. He showed no remorse, only anger at being witnessed. The medical evidence proved devastating to Grant's claims. Dr. Lee Stone testified about the pattern of injuries that indicated systematic abuse over months. The bruising patterns are consistent with repeated forceful gripping and restraint. Dr. Stone explained, these injuries cannot be explained by normal household accidents or pregnancy-related clumsiness. Does Mrs. Whitmore show any signs of the mental illness claimed by the defense? Ada Santos asked. None whatsoever. Her psychological evaluation revealed a woman suffering from trauma consistent with domestic violence, but no signs of psychosis, delusion, or cognitive impairment. Kellerman's cross-examination revealed his client's desperation. Dr. Stone, couldn't pregnancy hormones cause erratic behavior that might appear normal to someone unfamiliar with pregnancy complications? Mr. Kellerman, pregnancy doesn't cause women to hallucinate domestic violence. Physical injuries don't result from hormonal changes. Your question reveals fundamental misunderstanding of both pregnancy and psychology. The final blow to Grant's defense came from an unexpected source. Lisa Chen, Grant's ex-girlfriend from Chicago, had traveled to testify about similar patterns of abuse 5 years earlier. Grant used the same tactics then, Lisa testified via video link. Isolation from family and friends, financial control, documentation of alleged erratic behavior, and eventual physical violence when I tried to assert independence. Why didn't you pursue charges at the time? Ada Santos asked. Because Grant's lawyers contacted my employer and threatened my job. As a single woman supporting myself, I couldn't risk unemployment, but I've followed his marriage to Mrs. Whitmore with concern, hoping he'd changed. Has he changed? Based on what I've seen in this case, Grant has perfected his abusive techniques. He's more sophisticated now, more systematic in his control and manipulation. Judge Reeves reviewed all evidence before making her ruling. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens and the quiet hum of cameras. Mr. Kellerman, Judge Reeves said finally, your client's defense relies entirely on attacking the victim's credibility through claims unsupported by legitimate evidence. The medical testimony, witness accounts, and physical evidence overwhelmingly support the prosecution's case. Grant whispered urgently to his lawyer, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking as the reality of his situation became undeniable. Furthermore, Judge Reeves continued, the defense's presentation of misleading psychiatric evaluation borders on contempt of court. Dr. Webb's clarification reveals a willingness to misrepresent evidence that undermines your client's credibility. Dorothy felt vindication as she watched Grant's power and control crumble in the face of truth and evidence. The millionaire who terrorized her daughter was being held accountable by a system that valued justice over wealth. Motion for dismissal is denied, Judge Reeves announced. Motion for release is denied. Mr. Whitmore will remain in custody pending trial. Given the evidence of systematic abuse and witness intimidation, I'm also granting a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with Mrs. Whitmore. Grant's face went white as the implications of the ruling sank in. His business reputation, social standing, and carefully crafted public image were crumbling in real time before media cameras and public witnesses. Your Honor, Kellerman said desperately, my client requests reconsideration based on his community standing and business obligations. Mr. Kellerman, Judge Reeves interrupted, your client's community standing is exactly why he's being held without bail. Wealthy defendants with extensive resources pose significant flight risks and have demonstrated willingness to use their resources to intimidate witnesses. As court officers prepared to return Grant to custody, he turned toward Brooke with a look of such rage that security immediately stepped between them. This isn't over, Grant said loudly enough for the entire courtroom to hear. I'll destroy you for this betrayal. Judge Reeves slammed her gavel. Mr. Whitmore, you've just threatened the victim in open court in front of multiple witnesses. Bailiff, add witness intimidation to the charges. Grant was led away in handcuffs while media crews captured every moment of his public downfall. The millionaire husband who'd promised to cherish and protect Brooke had revealed his true nature for the entire community to witness. As they left the courthouse, Brooke felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of watching truth triumph over power, justice prevail over money, and accountability replace control. The evidence had spoken, and it had spoken clearly. Grant Whitmore was not a victim of false accusations, but a perpetrator of systematic domestic violence, whose wealth and connections could not override the facts of his criminal behavior. 3 months later, the spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Dorothy's kitchen as Brooke fed her newborn daughter. Hope Elizabeth Whitmore had arrived healthy and perfect, despite the trauma of her mother's final trimester. She has your stubborn streak, Dorothy observed, watching her granddaughter's determined grip on the bottle. That's going to serve her well in this world. Brooke smiled, marveling at how different life felt with Grant's controlling presence removed. I can't believe how quiet everything is without him criticizing every decision I make. Claire looked up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing the final divorce settlement. The financial investigation revealed assets worth over $12 million that Grant tried to hide through shell corporations. The court awarded you 50% plus additional compensation for emotional damages. $12 million. Brooke still couldn't process the numbers. During her marriage, and Grant had made her feel like every purchase required his approval while secretly controlling a fortune. Plus the scholarship fund, Dorothy added with satisfaction. The court ordered Grant's foundation to be restructured under independent management. Tyler will receive his full scholarship, and the fund will support other deserving students. Tyler had graduated as valedictorian and was thriving at State University. His thank you letter sat framed on Dorothy's refrigerator. Mrs. Whitmore, your courage to stand up for what's right changed my life and probably saved many others. I hope to make you proud. Dr. Bristone's final medical report showed that Brooke had recovered completely from the physical trauma, while her psychological healing continued with professional counseling. The support system makes all the difference, her therapist had explained. Recovery is faster when victims have family who believe them and institutions that protect them. Detective Chen provided updates on Grant's legal consequences. He pled guilty to avoid trial and received 3 years in prison for domestic violence, witness intimidation, and financial fraud. His business licenses have been revoked, and his professional reputation is destroyed. 3 years seems short for everything he did, Claire observed. But it's 3 years where he can't hurt anyone else, Dorothy replied, and his conviction will follow him permanently. No woman will be unaware of his history. Ada Santos had ensured that Grant's conviction included mandatory counseling and permanent restrictions on access to firearms. Domestic violence convictions carry long-term consequences beyond prison time. His ability to control and intimidate has been permanently damaged. The divorce proceedings had revealed the full extent of Grant's systematic abuse. Hidden recordings showed him coaching Dr. Webb to provide misleading psychiatric evaluations. Financial records documented deliberate isolation tactics designed to make Brooke dependent and unable to leave. The scariest part, Brooke told her counselor, is how normal it felt while it was happening. He was so good at making his control seem like love. That's what makes psychological abuse so dangerous, the counselor explained. Victims adapt gradually to increasing restrictions until they lose perspective on what's normal versus what's abusive. Maureen Banks had been promoted to assistant principal, partially based on her exemplary handling of the domestic violence situation. Your case became a training example for recognizing and responding to abuse, she told Brooke during a recent visit. It's helping other women get help before violence escalates. The media attention, initially overwhelming, had ultimately served justice. Grant's public downfall became a cautionary tale about wealth's inability to override accountability. His business associates and social connections had distanced themselves immediately after his conviction. The community response surprised me, Dorothy admitted. I expected more people to defend Grant because of his money and influence. Truth has a way of cutting through manipulation, Claire observed. Once people saw the evidence clearly, Grant's charm and wealth became irrelevant. Heather Williams had organized a support group for domestic violence survivors that met monthly at Roosevelt High School. Your courage to fight back publicly gave other women permission to seek help, she told Brooke. We've had 12 women leave abusive relationships since your case made headlines. The scholarship fund restructuring had exceeded everyone's expectations. Independent management discovered additional hidden assets, allowing the fund to support 20 students annually instead of the original plan for 5. Grant's attempt to use charity for personal image enhancement backfired completely, Claire noted with satisfaction. His money is now helping exactly the kind of students he tried to exclude. Roosevelt High School had implemented new domestic violence recognition training for all staff, using Brooke's case as an example of how institutional support could save lives. The teachers feel empowered to report concerning signs, Dorothy explained. We've identified 3 other abusive situations this year and connected families with resources. Dr. Stone continued monitoring Brooke's recovery and had become an advocate for comprehensive domestic violence medical protocols. Your case demonstrated how medical evidence can overcome victim-blaming narratives. We're training other physicians to recognize and document abuse patterns. As Hope gurgled contentedly in her mother's arms, Brooke reflected on the transformation of her life. A year ago, I thought normal marriage meant asking permission to visit my mother. Now I'm raising my daughter to understand that no one has the right to control her. Hope will grow up seeing women support each other instead of competing, Dorothy added. She'll understand that strength comes from community, not isolation. Claire had extended her Denver leave to help with Hope's early months, working remotely while providing childcare support. I want her to know her aunt as someone who chooses her own path rather than accepting someone else's limitations. The final piece of legal closure came when Grant's assets were liquidated to pay restitution and victim compensation. The mansion where Brooke had felt like a prisoner was sold, with proceeds funding expanded domestic violence services. It feels symbolic, Brooke observed. The house that represented my cage is now providing freedom for other women. The life insurance policy Grant had purchased, ostensibly for Brooke's protection, revealed another level of his planning. The policy was structured to pay only if your death appeared accidental. Ada Santos had explained. Combined with his systematic documentation of alleged mental illness, it suggests he was planning permanent elimination of the perceived problem. You mean he was planning to kill me? Brooke had asked with shocking calmness. The evidence suggests he was creating circumstances where your death would appear to be suicide or accident, allowing him to claim you were mentally unstable and inherit everything while gaining sympathy as a grieving widower. The revelation had initially shattered Brooke's remaining illusions about her marriage, but ultimately provided closure. I wasn't losing my mind or failing as a wife. I was being systematically destroyed by someone who viewed me as an obstacle to perfect control. Tyler's mother, Lisa Brooks, had been hired as the scholarship fund's administrative coordinator, her life experience providing valuable perspective for selecting recipients. Mrs. Whitmore's courage didn't just save her own life, Lisa told reporters. It created opportunities for families like mine who understand the value of education and second chances. As spring turned towards summer, Brooks' new life took shape around choices rather than control. She enrolled in a master's program in education administration, inspired by her mother's example of using authority to protect rather than dominate. Teaching gave me purpose before marriage, Brooke explained to her counselor. I want to rediscover that sense of contributing something meaningful to the world. Hope's nursery, decorated in soft yellows and greens rather than Grant's preferred formal blues, reflected Brooke's growing confidence in her own judgment. Every decision I make without asking permission feels like reclaiming another piece of myself. The final court hearing brought complete legal closure. Grant's parental rights were terminated based on domestic violence convictions and documented evidence of planning to harm Hope's mother. Children need protection from parents who view them as possessions rather than people. Judge Reeves had ruled. Hope will never know a father who controls through fear, Brooks said with satisfaction. She'll know men who respect women as equals, like Principal Hayes who protected us, Dr. Stone who healed us, and the officers who believed us. Dorothy's return to Roosevelt High had been marked by increased funding for counseling services and domestic violence prevention programs. Brooks' case taught us that abuse doesn't respect economic boundaries. Wealthy victims need institutional support just like everyone else. The school's new Hope Scholarship program, named in honor of Brooks' daughter, specifically supported students from non-traditional family structures. Tyler's situation shouldn't be a barrier to education, Dorothy explained. Single-parent families often produce the most determined students. As Brooke rocked Hope to sleep in the peaceful quiet of her mother's home, she reflected on the wisdom moment that had emerged from trauma. I learned that leaving wasn't weakness, but strength. I learned that admitting you need help isn't failure, but courage. And I learned that family means never facing danger alone. The millionaire husband who'd promised to cherish and protect her had instead systematically destroyed her autonomy, independence, and self-worth. But in revealing his true nature through public violence, Grant had inadvertently freed not just Brooke, but countless other women who recognized their own experiences in her story. The community that had witnessed her humiliation had become her support system. The wealth Grant had used to control her became resources for helping others. The shame he'd tried to create became strength she'd never known she possessed. Hope stirred in her mother's arms, her tiny fingers grasping reflexively for security. You'll never have to ask permission to have opinions, Brooke whispered to her daughter. You'll never have to accept less than you deserve. And you'll always know that women supporting women is stronger than any man's need to control. Outside Dorothy's kitchen window, spring flowers bloomed in a garden Brooke had planted without asking anyone's permission. The sight filled her with quiet satisfaction, not the desperate gratitude Grant had demanded, but the genuine contentment that came from making choices based on her own judgment and values. The millionaire's public downfall had become a new beginning for everyone he tried to control. Justice had not only been served, but had created ripple effects of protection, support, and opportunity that would outlast Grant's prison sentence by decades. In the end, the most powerful lesson was the simplest truth, backed by courage and supported by community, would always triumph over wealth without character. Grant's money had bought him temporary power but permanent disgrace. Brooke's courage had cost her a marriage but gained her a life. As Hope settled into peaceful sleep, Brooke understood that sometimes the people meant to protect you become the ones you need protection from. But family, real family, means never facing that alone. And that truth was worth more than all of Grant's millions combined. The story that began with a slap echoing through a school hallway ended with a baby's contented sigh in a grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by women who'd learned that supporting each other was the strongest foundation any family could build. Their victory was complete, their future secure, and their lesson clear: justice delayed is not justice denied when truth finally finds its voice.